and welcome to the broadcast of Veganish and All Things Healthy, episode 211. And today I have a wonderful guest named Talaya Dendy. She is a cancer survivor. She was diagnosed with Hodgkin's lymphoma in 2011. And the diagnosis took her by surprise. She was considering herself fairly healthy. She rarely got sick, and her cancer journey helped her to realize what was truly going on underneath the surface. She was forced to come to terms with things and people that were causing her stress and unhappiness. She often says that her purpose found helped her to overcome the fear and comfort that was holding her back. Welcome, Talaya. I want to make sure I get your name right.
Thanks for having me, and my name is pronounced Talaya.
Talaya. Okay. Talaya.
Mm-hmm.
Sorry about
that. Happy to be talking with you.
Yeah. And your cancer journey, your healthcare, let's just talk about what happened. You were formerly healthy, and then you got this, I guess it's not non-Hodgkin's. My family member died from non-Hodgkin's lymphoma, but you had Hodgkin's lymphoma. Can you talk a little bit about that and your process, your diagnosis?
Yeah, so unfortunately, it took over a year to get to my diagnosis. And so actually, I had cancer in 2010, unbeknownst to me. So a whole year before I actually knew what was going on. So in 2010, I had went to my primary care doctor, who I had been seeing for a few years. And at the time, I was living in the suburbs in Minnesota. And I went to her and I said, I'm a little concerned. There is this small lump on the side of my neck that is for a few weeks now. It has not gone away. And so she knew that I worked out fairly often. And so she had basically waved her hands and said, oh, don't worry about it. It's probably just a pulled muscle. Well, she didn't touch it. She didn't look at it or anything. And so when I left the doctor's office, I left feeling dismissed.
That's terrible service.
Yes. I left feeling dismissed. But deep down, I knew that something wasn't right. I just didn't know what it was. But with everything else that was going on in my life, trying to climb the corporate ladder, doing all these things, running here, running there, trying to help support people in my family, I put it on the back burner. So let's fast forward now to 2011, March of 2011. I had went
Talaya, it looks like the connection, let me try, the connection's getting a little broken up here. Maybe, do you have a stronger connection on your phone? Maybe I'll just try moving that. Okay, go ahead, Talaya.
Okay, so that's prior to going to this new primary care doctor, I had shared with my mom that I was concerned. I said, this lump has been on the side of my neck.
Oh, you there, Talaya? Talaya? Go ahead. Okay, continue on.
So I explained to my mom that I had this lump on the side of my neck. I was concerned. She said, why don't you try to go to a different doctor? Go to the doctor that I'm seeing. The doctor that my mother was seeing happened to be a Somali lady. So I went to her. After my physical, I had pointed out the lump on my neck. I shared with her that it had been there for about a year. My previous primary care doctor basically had blown it off. Immediately, she said, can I look at it? Can I touch it? And she just had a barrage of questions. Stark difference from the previous doctor. So she looked at it, touched it. We talked about, if I was feeling any other symptoms or anything. I could tell by the look on her face that something was not right. She said, Talaya, I need for you to go in for an ultrasound as soon as possible. So went in for an ultrasound, and I could tell right away from the technician's face something was wrong, but she, of course, couldn't say anything. She said a doctor will call you in a day or two. a doctor called me and said, well, the ultrasound was inconclusive. We need to do a fine needle aspiration. Mm-hmm. That's where they take a small tissue sample and they try to get some cells as well. Mm-hmm. So I did that, and that came back inconclusive because the sample size that they had gotten was too small. Okay. Number 3. Well, we have to do a biopsy of that lymph node. So they took a larger biopsy of the lymph node, and a few days later, on a Friday, while driving home from work, I got a call from a nurse, and she basically said, I'm sorry to tell you this, but you have Hodgkin's lymphoma. And so I was just sitting there in a daze, like, what did she just say? I asked her to repeat herself. Mm-hmm. And then I just started firing off questions, and she said, honey, she interrupted me. She said, honey, I know you're upset. I know you're afraid. I can't answer any of those questions, but what I can tell you is that my husband had Hodgkin's lymphoma in the past, and he's doing great today. Mm-hmm. So in an attempt to calm my nerves and to be able to drive home, I stopped at a TJ Maxx. I walked around TJ Maxx for about 30 minutes, really looking for some type of answer because I had none. And that was one of the frustrating things, too, was getting that call on a Friday at the end of the day when no one can tell me anything. Mm-hmm. And so, again, walked around the TJ Maxx, got my nerves together so I could drive home, and then I proceeded to call the people closest to me, my family. And, of course, they had questions. They were worried and concerned. And I asked them, I said, this weekend I need some time for myself. Mm-hmm. Unfortunately, you have questions that I can't answer. I don't even have answers, but I'm asking you to give me this weekend to myself. Mm-hmm. That weekend, I cried, I prayed, I went through every emotion humanly possible. Mm-hmm. At that time, I didn't know what I was doing. I was doing what I was led to do and what felt right. Mm-hmm. And so I just sat with all of those emotions. I didn't leave the house. Like I said, I cried. I was angry. I prayed, all those things. And Monday morning, I was able to get on the phone, make the calls I needed to make, and start the process, the long, long process to healing. Mm-hmm. One of the best things I could have done for myself was take that time for myself and to myself, and to just sit with what had been shared with me.
Mm-hmm. And prior to the cancer, had that been a difficult thing for you to do?
Yes and no. Yes, because I was working a lot. I was trying to be there for all these other people. But at the same time, I'm someone who's in tune with my emotions and what I'm feeling. So I would say yes, in a way, because of time restrictions and just trying to do all these different things. But once I made the time, I was always, very in tune with how I was feeling.
Mm-hmm. Wow. And then what happened next?
And so after that, of course, there's hundreds of appointments, and I'm exaggerating, but there's a lot of appointments that you have to go to. You have to get staged to determine, the level of cancer you have. That helps to determine how much treatment, what kind of treatment, that sort of thing. Met with my oncologist, had to do a bone marrow biopsy to make sure that the cancer had not spread to my bones. So there's a number of different tests and things that you have to do to get prepared. Mm-hmm. And then, of course, there was a minor surgery to insert the port where I would receive my chemotherapy. Mm-hmm. And met my oncologist, really amazing oncologist. I couldn't have asked for a better doctor and healthcare team. However, even though I had a great oncologist, healthcare team, and the support of my family, throughout my cancer journey, what I found was missing for me was someone who could relate. Someone who had been through something similar to what I was going through and who could understand and say, Talaya, you're not crazy, crazy. You're not imagining things. This is a normal part of the process.
Mm-hmm.
And so for me, that was a big void.
So they didn't get you like connected with a cancer-specific support group at the time?
Where I lived, I went to one support group, and quite frankly, I left.
Oh, okay.
People there were older than me. They were very negative. I was the only black person there. They were much older, and I just didn't want to be in that environment. My cells did not need to hear the negativity that was going on in there.
That's what, actually, I've heard this before, that people are on the fence about support groups sometimes for those reasons. Mm-hmm.
Yes, and I wanted to live. I didn't want to talk about dying because that's not what I wanted for myself. And I just knew that carrying all that negative energy, and I'm not saying you're supposed to dismiss those feelings.
Mm-hmm.
You're not supposed to get stuck there. And
Mm-hmm.
that was something that I was not going to do. So that didn't work for me.
Mm-hmm.
And I, in an attempt to find support for myself, I just started learning more about mind-body connection, mindset, and doing a lot of studying and work with that. And I created a healing journal for myself that included Bible healing scriptures. And so I would read those every day. I'd work on my mindset. I would journal. And that is what helped me get through it. Those are some of the things that helped me get through it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And I think in the journaling, was that the basis for your book, I Survived Cancer, and Here's How I Did It?
Actually, that was something different. Someone had reached out to me. They had read my story, and they said, Talaya, I am doing this compilation of survivors who we would like to share their story and some things that helped them get through their cancer experience. And so that's how I became a part of that book. There were some very poignant things that happened on my cancer journey that I remember clearly and that I know helped me heal. For example, the caregiver, my mother, her love and support, I know that helped me heal. Mm-hmm. Sticking with exercising and walking and doing what I could, that helped me heal. Working on my mindset helped me heal. So it was so many different things.
Mm-hmm. And was the treatment the standard treatment of chemo, radiation, surgery?
Well, the surgery really wasn't considered part of the treatment. That was to insert the port. So that's kind of different. But my standard of care for Hodgkin's lymphoma was 6 months of chemotherapy and a month of radiation. Mm-hmm. I will say that I decided on that treatment because that treatment for someone my age at the time and at that stage of cancer, that level of treatment had been proven to have a high success and survivorship rate. I think it was like well over 80%.
Oh, good. So you went in optimistic.
Yeah. And so having those discussions with my oncologist, asking him to be straightforward, tell me the success rate. Where can I go validate this information for myself? So those things helped me to make those decisions, and I felt good about it. And thankfully, it all worked out well.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Mm-hmm. And then tell me about how you became what is known, and I've never heard of this, as a cancer doula. I've heard of a doula before, usually with women that are pregnant or expecting, and I just wanted to know how that journey led you to become a doula, where you went for training on that, and can you tell us about what it is and why it's important?
So first, I'd like to start off with, you're not alone. Many people have not heard of a cancer doula. And so I will tell you that I started by calling myself a cancer coach. When I started down this journey, I'm like, there's coaches everywhere. And what I'm doing is I'm not really coaching. I'm walking with the people I support. So coaching wasn't the right word for what I'm doing. and it didn't feel right for me.
Mm-hmm.
So I started researching different supportive roles and things like that. And, of course, I had heard of a birth doula. Now, the definition of a doula is someone who supports another person through a major life change or a significant health-related experience. That is cancer in my mind. And so I said, I'm going to call myself a cancer doula.
Mm-hmm.
Now, the way that I break it down for people is I say birth doula, beginning of life. And now there's death doulas. They help people transition to the end of life.
Mm-hmm.
As a cancer doula, I focus on the present with my clients. And what we're focusing on is making sure that they have the tools and the resources and support to focus on the present and help them get on the other side of cancer, so that once they get on the other side of cancer, they will have a better quality of life. Not just be a cancer survivor, but have a better quality of life overall.
Mm-hmm.
And so I decided to become a cancer doula because of the gaps that I had in my care.
Mm-hmm.
And I had realized that, there were a lot of skill sets that I had possessed that really helped me. And that was being someone who loved to research and read. I love to learn new things. For some people, doing a lot of research about their treatment options or understanding their type of cancer, that may be too overwhelming for them. And so I just thought about different things that I had to do along the way on my cancer journey. And then I also listened to the feedback that I had gotten from my oncologist. And he was just amazed at how well I was advocating for myself, how I came to my appointments prepared, all of those things. And I said, well, I'm going to cover 4 key areas with my clients in addition to some other things. But these are the 4 key areas. The first one, of course, is emotional support and mindset. I think that's very important to work on those things early on in the diagnosis, because that can help to set the tone later.
Mm-hmm.
So that's the first thing. The other thing is nutrition. I'm not a nutritionist, but there are certain things that, people want to make sure that they do to be able to withstand the treatment and to stay as healthy as possible and as strong as possible. So we want to make sure that they're getting good nutrients and that they're eating something. The third piece is, understanding your treatment options. I don't diagnose. I don't tell people what their options are. What I do is I help them understand what has been shared with them, from their oncologist or healthcare team. I help them understand their kind of cancer. I help them to, like I did, make sure they get the information about how successful have these treatment options for other people. And so I don't make decisions for them. I just help them to understand what their options are, help them to think through the pros and cons, and then they can take that and make the best decisions for themselves.
Mm-hmm.
The fourth piece is communication. And that could be communicating with your family, communicating with your healthcare team, your employer. A lot of times when there's a cancer diagnosis, communication breaks down. We don't want that to happen in this case.
Mm-hmm.
So those are the 4 key areas. And then there's a host of other things, too, that may come up on an individual basis. So my support is personalized to what people need.
Mm-hmm.
As far as training, I have a coaching certification, and I'm currently pursuing a certification with the board-certified patient advocates. And so I will be pursuing that certification in September, taking the exam, and that's to become a certified patient or health advocate.
Mm-hmm.
I do a lot of advocacy for the people I support, and I just want to make that official with a certification because that's huge.
That is.
It's huge.
Now, do you have to do some special preparation or study packet for that, or go to do a certain amount of hours volunteer? What are the requirements if someone out there wants to also consider becoming a board-certified patient advocate?
Sure. So there's an application process. And in that application process, you can already be a patient advocate in some way. So, for example, I qualified because I had to advocate for myself, and I have proof that I've done that. It could be someone in the healthcare field. It could be someone who's a caregiver for a loved one. So the first step is filling out this application and then getting your application approved. Once your application is approved, you can go in and pay the fee, and schedule your exam date. That exam currently is online, of course. And then they provide different resources. There is a study manual, and then there's a book that they suggest that you buy. It's not a requirement, but they do provide a study manual. And if I'm not mistaken, that exam covers some key components of healthcare, like insurance, like ethics, those kinds of things.
Mm-hmm. Scope of practice, knowing your role, knowing your boundaries, probably.
Yes. Rights and HIPAA laws and all of that fun stuff. Mm-hmm. And so that's kind of the process for that. Mm-hmm.
That sounds really interesting. And do you have a website for if someone wanted to learn more? Or would they just Google Board Certified Health Patient Advocate?
They could look up Board Certified Patient Advocate, and I could give you the website after the show, and show notes, you could add it to that.
Okay.
I don't know it offhand, and I don't want to give the wrong information.
No problem. And I have another website here called isurvivecancer.co. I don't know if that's a typo, if it's C-O-M, or it's supposed to be C-O. Is it C-O-M?
It's actually C-O.
It is C-O, okay. Backslash. Mm-hmm.
And so that website is for the book, I Survived Cancer, and Here's How I Did It. And as I mentioned earlier, that is a compilation of my story and other cancer survivors' stories. Mm-hmm. And we share different things that helped us survive cancer. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Well, I was very disheartened, but I've heard the story before about the type of lack of care that you received at your first visit from either a dismissive doctor or an incompetent doctor or someone that was just, frankly, prejudiced, perhaps, and didn't want to treat you. And just wondering, if you ever had that experience again as a patient, would you consider going to patient relations and actually, documenting your experience with them? Because I feel like these providers that give poor care need to be held accountable too.
That's a great. I want to thank you for asking that question. Absolutely, without a heartbeat. And I can't put it all on that doctor. Yes, she was responsible, but when I look back, I'm responsible for my self-worth.
That's true.
Had I taken the initiative to say, you know what, that's not acceptable, and forget all these other things that are going on in my life, my health is a priority, I'm going to get a second opinion, or I'm going to get someone to give me an opinion. Mm-hmm. Prior to going through cancer, that was not my mindset. Today, absolutely. Mm-hmm. Absolutely, without a blink of an eye, I would go to patient relations. I would definitely go to a different doctor right away, and I would advise anyone else to do the same. Now, that is why I'm also a cancer health equity consultant, because in healthcare, that happens a lot, and it also happens in the cancer space as well. Mm-hmm. For example, many Black people and other minorities are not offered clinical trials as a standard of care.
Right. Women either.
Absolutely. It's usually affluent people who know doctors and who have all these connections, let's just say that. Mm-hmm. And that's not right.
Mm-mm. The body of research in general is skewed to white males. Yeah. And it's research, it's so expensive. It's so, and I'm not sure why that is. Is that just selfish? Is that just unconscious behavior? Is that because there's limited resources? And I have no idea, but it definitely is the topic of the era where we have to get more diverse clinical trials and research studies and publishing, not just, and yes, it's expensive, but I mean, you're treating many different bodies, many different cultures, many different people, and just having the research for this one dominant group is inadequate at best.
Yeah, there are a number of factors that are contributing to that, and quite frankly, cost is really not that big of an issue because there are so many research grants and things like that. Mm-hmm. Quite frankly, certain groups of people are not even offered clinical trials as a form of care. They're just not offered them, so they're not aware. Mm-hmm. And if they are aware, they're automatically thought of as people who can't afford to stay in a hotel. They can't afford to stay away for long periods of time to participate in the clinical trials. But again, there's a lot of different options out there that people just simply are not aware of. And so that's why there needs to be more education. There needs to be more communication as well. But then, here's the other piece of it. There has to be that acknowledgement of how Black people were used in heinous, medical malpractice. Mm-hmm. So that pushes people away, too. They don't want to be experimented on. That's how they view that. Mm-hmm. And so there's so many different factors that need to be addressed, that need to be discussed and acknowledged.
Yeah.
And that's a whole fact.
Yeah, and it definitely, not with cancer, but also with cancer, but one of the most clear examples I remember is the coronavirus and the hesitancy in the BIPOC communities to be willing to take the vaccine. And it was very, very not advocated for enough, in my view, as a white woman looking onward, concerned about BIPOC and whether they were going to get the shot, whether they were going to get the vaccine, and just very few public advocates, even government leaders, to encourage people. Was that your experience with coronavirus?
I've seen a lot of different things that, wanted to get it. They were okay with getting it, and some people weren't. So I've seen a variety of different things. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Okay, yeah. What about with promotion within the community, though, of leaders?
I've seen leaders in the community promoting getting the vaccination. A lot of the politicians, a lot of the churches and things like that were promoting getting vaccinated.
Oh, good to hear. Okay.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Well, that's why we interact. And I know, at least at UCSF, where I work, we have initiated, I think it was last year, the Diversity, Equity, Inclusion Committee, of which my manager is chair of, or director rather, is chair of, or co-chair, and it's both specifically there to try to help advocate for BIPOC in all aspects of healthcare and bring up all of these issues and make awareness and be a force and stand up. And I definitely feel that is the right attitude to take. To advocate is to be made to be seen and heard and made to be included, and to call out the bad behaviors when substandard care is given. You could have easily said, well, I went to the doctor and the doctor said there's nothing to worry about, that first doctor. So I must be, just imagining things. But you were intelligent to listen to your own intuition and not to let some title, have authority over you, and actually you followed through and it saved your life.
Yeah. And, my regret, and now that I'm wiser and more in tune with my self-worth, so to speak, I look back and I say I shouldn't have waited as long as I did, because that may have cut my treatment in half and things like that. But we can always say shoulda, woulda, coulda.
Sure.
It's about what did I learn from that. And that's what I learned. You have to take matters into your own hands. Mm-hmm. And just because one doctor is blowing you off does not mean that you don't deserve an answer, that there isn't an answer. And so you keep going and you keep pursuing that until you are satisfied with the answer that you're given, not only an answer, but what's the plan of action.
Mm-hmm.
And then as far as diversity, inclusion, and things like that, in healthcare, but then also in general, it's nice to have those things. However, we need accomplices. Those are people who are willing to put their own titles and things like that on the line to do what's right, to make sure that underrepresented and underserved people are getting due justice and equitable care. And that's across the board.
Mm-hmm.
So I think that's what's important. There's a lot of these organizations creating, the diversity, equity, and inclusion,
mm-hmm.
and that's great.
Mm-hmm.
But it takes action. It takes sometimes people being willing to put certain things on the line to make sure that things are happening. Not just talking about what needs to happen,
mm-hmm.
what is actually being done to move the need forward. There's a difference.
There is, and I think part of it is everything's data-driven in the hospital. So if they have the support in place for DEI to capture data, to advocate, and to make the cases, then it's a lot better received than without the data,
Mm-hmm. And that's true, too.
And data-driven doesn't only make change, but it's very influential. So that's measurable. They can measure progress over time. They can see where the gaps in care are. They can advocate for a specific funding for different gaps. And I think it's a good beginning. It is a little sad that we're just starting it now, but better late than never, and better to hopefully it'll take off quickly.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely. And how all of this is evolving. And like I said, it's good that people are finally taking notice. But behind that, there has to be some concrete action and evidence of that things are changing and getting better.
Mm-hmm.
For people that have been oppressed and haven't received equitable care and in other areas of equity as well. So it's good that it's happening.
It is. And it's good that it's happening from within the communities, too. For those who don't know, BIPOC is Black, Indigenous, People of Color. It's the kind of all-encompassing capsulization label now. Hopefully that's a appropriate label. I like it. It's easy to remember. I feel like I wanted to ask you, too, about your journey with the cancer. So are you cancer-free? Do you have to go back every so often and get tested? How does that work are you considered in remission? What is the status?
Okay, so I am 11 years old now. This past April made 11 years. And
you're 11 years out. Sorry, my connection got a little bit foggy there.
Okay, so I'm 11 years out now as of April this year, and I am considered NED. My oncologist doesn't like to say cured, but I'm
right.
NED, no evidence of disease, and I've been that way for the past 11 years. I go see my oncologist once a year now.
Wow.
And, of course, into survivorship, it's my responsibility to make sure that, I'm eating healthy, I'm exercising, I'm trying to minimize stress,
mm-hmm.
and then also staying on top of other appointments and preventative care. So I make sure I get my mammograms every year. I make sure I get my annual exams every year and any other cancer screenings that fit into my age group. And so just staying on top of those things. And then the wonderful thing that, unfortunately, a lot of people don't get is my oncologist, way back in 2011, gave me a survivorship care plan. And I want to tell the audience, the listeners, if you are in cancer treatment at the moment, or if you're into survivorship, make sure you get a survivorship care plan. Because that care plan should be laying out for you what appointments you need to stick with and how often, and, what things you want to look out for. So, for example, in my case, because of the type of chemotherapy, I need to make sure my heart is okay, my lungs are okay. If anything comes up, I need to go in right away and make sure there's nothing major going on. I could possibly develop a second cancer. Thankfully, I haven't, so that's why I stay on top of my mammograms.
Mm-hmm.
And so that survivorship care plan should be your guide to making sure that you're staying on top of your appointments and things like that. But also, it's a great piece of information to hand off to another doctor if some other health concern should arise.
Mm-hmm.
And so I want to make sure, because I'm advocating for that too on a different project that I'm working on, is survivorship care
plan. Mm-hmm. And I honestly have never heard of that, and I hope that's standard knowledge in oncology, survivor care plan.
Unfortunately, I'm finding that it isn't.
Mm-hmm.
It really depends. What I'm learning so far, it depends on your age. It depends on the hospital or oncologist. Mm-hmm. And so there are a lot of people that I've talked with recently who have not received a survivorship care plan and have never heard of it.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
And so I asked my oncologist why. And he said, Talaya, because I think part of it is because you were so young. And so when you received your cancer diagnosis, you still had so many years ahead of you. But like for a person who's like 60 and they're diagnosed with cancer, a particular oncologist may say, well, they don't need a survivorship care plan. And that's unfortunate.
Mm.
So I think there's a lot of different factors that go into why people don't get them. And it could be based on the hospital and how they provide care. It could be someone's age. Sometimes it's race. Sometimes people are given survivorship care plans and they toss them to the side because it hasn't been explained to them very well what it is and why it's so important. So many different factors.
Yeah. Well, you're really punching that point today to definitely not dismiss survivorship care plan and how it's important for the road to recovery and keeping everything organized. So do you feel like with your specific journey, you said you were really healthy before, and have you become even more diligent? What were the lessons? I always say there's lessons that cancer can bring and teach beyond the physical. Do you want to share any of those lessons that you think you needed to learn through the cancer journey?
Absolutely. There's a lot that I've learned. I ate pretty well, and like I said, I worked out before. But that wasn't really anything new.
Mm-hmm.
But one lesson was slow down.
Mm-hmm.
The second lesson was, who cares what society says you should be doing, how much money you should be making? Yeah, you should go to college and climb the corporate ladder. I did those things and I was miserable.
Mm-hmm.
Find what makes you happy and do that.
Mm-hmm.
The third thing is say no. If you have a lot on your plate, say no. You can't be everything to everybody. That is not being selfish. That's taking care of you and your mental health.
Mm-hmm. Was that difficult for you prior to the cancer?
Yes, saying no.
Mm-hmm.
Yes.
Mm-hmm.
That was difficult. Mm-hmm. Because I didn't want to disappoint anybody.
Mm-hmm.
But it's okay to say no because you have to put yourself first at times and take care of yourself. Because at the times you want to say yes, if you don't have your health, you can't say yes anyway.
Exactly. It seemed like you came to that, I would say, spiritual growth or spiritual awareness about that pretty quickly when you went to the TJ Maxx. It was so sweet. Tell me what it was about TJ Maxx that calmed you down. I'm just curious. When my aunt got cancer, we went to the ocean because it's that kind of symbol of the eternal of life. And I just wanted to know what TJ Maxx did for you. I think it's great.
Sure. Well, I was familiar with the TJ Maxx because it was not far from where I work. So that was a safe stopping point for me. It was familiar. So that's one thing. But what it did was it just allowed me to walk through the store freely And because people are shopping and doing their thing, it wasn't like I wasn't standing out like a person in distress.
Okay, so it kind of gave you that familiar normalcy environment.
Yes. And it allowed me to just walk through the store that I was familiar with and just process or try to process and calm my nerves. I love to walk. Walking is very relaxing for me. So that was the other piece. I could walk through the store. I was trying to walk off the nerves.
Yeah, of course.
Yeah.
When you first hear that, whether it's yourself or a family member, there's nothing like it. Except it seems that way in the movies. It's just a bombshell.
It's really, that whole experience was like an out-of-body experience the whole time, from the moment I heard those words through treatment. And it felt like, especially when I was not feeling my best, it felt like I was trying to get out of my body and I was just looking at myself. And I know people may be like, she's crazy, but I've even heard other people that have gone through cancer say the same thing. It's like an out-of-body experience.
Like you feel disconnected.
Yeah. And one thing I can share, too, was when I went in for my first chemotherapy infusion, I actually shed a tear right before they were going to start the infusion, because it hit me that who I was up to that point was going to be different, and I wasn't sure how. I wasn't sure how all of that was going to affect me. So I shed a tear. I'm like, wow, and it felt like I was looking at an old version of me. I can't even explain it.
Almost like you're experiencing a mini death a little bit, but you were observing it at the same time.
Yeah, something like that, yeah. And I knew that from that point forward, things were going to be different. I didn't know how.
Because having the infusion really solidified that you had cancer.
Absolutely.
To you.
And it solidified that change was definitely coming. I just didn't know what that was going to look like. And see, that's the other reason why I would have loved to have someone to talk to who had been through it, because the uncertainty of cancer, to me, that was the toughest part, because I'm a planner. I like things organized. But when you are diagnosed with cancer, you have to learn how to go with the flow.
Good days and bad days.
And, the treatment may work, it may not. So there's so many uncertainties. And those uncertainties get minimized as time goes on. But especially in the beginning, it's like uncertainty screaming loud.
Yeah.
Know what's going to happen in the next 5 minutes.
Yeah, definitely. Do you feel like, sorry, I don't want to make sure, are you still there? My phone reception. Do you feel the experience either boosted your faith or reduced faith, or did it have any impact on your faith?
It absolutely had an impact. I was a believer before, and I was a very hopeful person before. But God really showed up in my life. Not that he hadn't before, but I know that I'm blessed. I know that I'm still here because of him. And I know that through all of this, my purpose was revealed. So now, even though I'm making less money, even though, I budget more than I did before, I wake up every day and I'm encouraged. I'm excited about the people I get to talk to and the work I get to do. Whereas before, prior to cancer, I woke up and I'm like, well, this is something that I have to do to make a living. And this is something I should be doing. And I always say that through cancer, my purpose actually found me. And, it led me to what I'm doing today, and I feel like that's the way God wanted it. This is what I'm supposed to be doing. That's why I'm still here.
Mm-hmm. Wow, that's really gives some meaning to the context, and it doesn't just keep it in the negative or suffering or woe is me or, that kind of, I'm sure you've had days that way where you feel sorry for yourself, but you're standing back and looking at the bigger picture of how it has impacted your life from the life that you led before, which was the messaging that was telling you this is how you're living the life and this is the recipe for happiness, and you did everything and it wasn't delivering.
Yeah, and I do want to ask, I don't want this to sound like, oh, cancer so easy, it's just this blessing.
No,
hell it is not. Cancer is hard, it sucks, it's ugly, it's hell.
Mm-hmm.
I'm not going to lie. But I'm grateful that I was able to look beyond that and say, okay, cancer is trying to take something from me. When I flipped that and said, what can I get from cancer? The game changed.
That's a great attitude. Yeah. Mm-hmm. Because you're still living. You're still, you know what? Until your last breath, you're still living. So, we call it cancer, call it disease, call it something else. You're still you,
Mm-hmm. Still here. And, some things are different, but that's okay.
Yeah.
That's okay. And it's not going to be easy. And that's one thing I want people to understand. It's okay to be angry, mad, sad. It's okay to have those negative feelings. But don't let those things overcome you. Mm-hmm. Work through them. And then find the blessings. Find the meaning in things. Because I'm a firm believer that things happen for a reason. No one deserves cancer. It sucks that people die from cancer, especially children and babies.
Mm-hmm.
But don't.
It strikes all ages. Mm-hmm.
It can help you.
Yeah. And I think you learning and looking and asking from the spiritual point of view of the lessons, at least is valuable. You can get some growth from it,
Yeah. And the thing is, I always tell people you got to do the work, though. You gotta do the work, because there's a lot of times when things are not going to appear for you. You got to do the work, and you got to do the soul searching, and make those connections for yourself, because no one can tell you those things.
Mm-hmm. Right. I think it can give you the space and maybe the legitimacy to feel for people that have a hard time stopping, like you say, slowing down and actually being really doing self-care for them and putting boundaries on others and limits. It really can bring up those issues so that you have kind of a legitimate reason to become that if you don't have that naturally.
Yeah. And this is an observation learned in working with people and supporting people. A lot of us are dealing with suppressed trauma. And it starts with cancer. We start talking about cancer, and the more I work with someone, that's when certain things start to unravel.
Yeah.
Certain things they've been through in life that they haven't addressed, that they just kind of pushed down in a deep, dark corner. Those things are making us sick, too.
Mm-hmm. So unresolved issues or maybe abuse and trauma. Yes,
unresolved trauma, unaddressed trauma. We have to take care of those things, and don't wait until something major, a major health crisis happens.
Mm-hmm.
Go see a counselor, a therapist, and talk about those things. Get those things out, because it's affecting your body. You may not see it.
Mm-hmm. Energetically, yeah. I believe that.
Mm-hmm.
Definitely believe that. Oh, my goodness. Talaya, your stories. What books do you recommend for people maybe recently diagnosed? What books did you read, or what were your inspirations when you were going through your cancer?
Sure. So I have several books, actually. One of them is called Anti-Cancer, mm-hmm. and that's a new way of life, and that's by Dr. David Servin Schreiber. The other one is The Secret Language of Your Body, and that's by Anna Segal. The other one is Witness a Miracle, Your Own, and that's by, the author's last name is Levinson. And a few years into my diagnosis, or a few years after, I actually was told about this book. It's called Love, Medicine, and Miracles by Dr. Bernie Segal. And so those are the books that I highly recommend.
Well, that's helpful. Those are great tools. What would you like to see diversity, equity, inclusion as it's been codified recently and in the minds of the public consciousness now as a term of advocacy? Where do you see it going? Where do you feel it needs to be encouraged? What would communicate to the BIPOC communities?
I would like to see less people dying from, untreated health care, poor health care. I would like to see less people dying. I would like to see people treated fairly and not treated a certain way based on if they have government insurance or private insurance. I would like to see everyone have the same access to resources, education, communication. I would like to see doctors and other people in the healthcare team be actually trained on how to connect with and communicate with people from the BIPOC communities.
Yeah.
That's another barrier.
Yeah. I do too, and I think everything starts with intention. Everything starts with advocacy. So this has been an amazing interview. Did you have any other thoughts or wishes for the hospital scene out there, or for I don't know, just any last final thoughts on where you seem to be pretty well. If, gosh forbid, anything else further would happen, you seem very well equipped and you have your resources and you know what to do, and you've been through this before. I don't know, any other thoughts? Should there be more media, more movies about people of color going through cancer journeys? Do you feel like that's represented enough?
It's not represented. And I'm not sure if movies is the right avenue, because we all know...
or TV or something.
There needs to be more communication. There needs to be more advertising. There needs to be Black people and people from the BIPOC community on those brochures and flyers in the hospitals and clinics. I didn't see any in 2011. And when I go to the doctor now, I'm lucky if I see one.
Okay, so literally the face on the image in the marketing materials and the publicity of it.
Absolutely. I know doctors are overwhelmed, but I'm going to need doctors to put more time into when they're first meeting a patient, connecting with them, understanding how to say their name. Don't just blow it off.
Like me, Talaya. You know what cued me was Lay's potato chips. I'm not going to lie. But you have to have the heart there, too. Lead with your heart to connect, right?
Absolutely. And I was going to get to that, too. You have to look at people as fellow human beings.
Yeah. And you can tell whether you're viewed as that or not by that interaction.
You can feel it.
You can feel the energy. Yeah.
Yeah. And just the way a person is looked at when they walk into a clinic. Who's at the front desk? How are they greeting the people that walk in?
Yeah.
I mean, that's where it starts. And so just those common interactions that a lot of people don't even think about, those actually matter.
Right. Yeah. Yeah, and apologies go a long way, too, when care is substandard at times. I think ownership and acknowledging that in front of the patient goes a long way to build trust. I think people are sympathetic to the healthcare field, but there does need to be that humility, that softening.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
And a commitment to see it through.
Right. And looking within.
Yeah. That first doctor could have said, I've had a terrible day and I don't have any fuel left in the tank. I want to get you good care. I'm just not equipped right now to do this. So let's reschedule or let me get someone for you that can step in to help or something, rather than just minimize your symptoms and dismiss it. There were a lot of other choices. It's okay to say, what, I'm out of fuel. I'm a doctor. I work this many shifts. I'm out of fuel. But you need care, and I'm going to do what I can to make sure you get that. I mean, even that would have gone a long way.
That's right. Mm-hmm. It's unfortunate, but it was a lesson. And that's why I go to bat for so many people today, because some people don't have it in them. Mm-hmm. To advocate for themselves, to get the information they need, to make all these calls and things like that. And so that's why it's so critical for people to be willing to step in for those who just can't do it for themselves.
Yeah. No, it's so important. Okay. Well, Talaya, thank you so much for being a guest. Do you have a social media handle you'd like to share if anyone wants to follow you on Instagram or anything? Or do you have want to do Facebook, or what's your favorite?
Yes. So people can find me on Instagram. I am on the other side 17. Again, that's on the other side 17. Mm-hmm. I'm on LinkedIn. You can just look up Talaya Dendy. Mm-hmm. And then also they can go to my website.
And Dendy is Dendy, just to make sure we got the right spelling at the end there.
Mm-hmm. Got it. And my website is ontheotherside.life. And also, I have a podcast, and it's called Navigating Cancer Together. So,
there's a resource right there. If someone doesn't have a resource, they can just follow your podcast.
That's right. And I have guests on there from all walks of life. And so I've been getting really good feedback from it. So check it out.
Will do. Thank you so much, Talaya.
Thank you for having me. It's been a pleasure talking with you.
You too.